Hey, it's Lauren with Bead Box Bargains. Welcome to our Beading Basics segment. Today, we're going to talk about some of the different ways to use and finish Tigertail beading wire. So I'm going to be using a gold colored Tigertail, so you'll get some contrast with the silver findings I have, just so you can see a little more easily what's going on. So Tigertail beading wire, if you're not familiar, is a multi-strand wire made of individual, usually stainless steel wires, twisted together and coated in nylon. So when you're finishing Tigertail wire, you're going to generally use a crimp bead. And those can look a lot of different ways. Some of the most common are either more round crimp beads. These are Find 1102 on the Bead Box Bargain store, or tubes, which are, this is Find 1101. You can see the difference here. These are more like a elongated cylinder. All right, so I've got some crimp beads, and the basics with any kind of crimp bead, I'm going to grab some jump rings and we're going to use those for our demonstration clasp halves. Here we go. So you would put the crimp bead on the wire, like so, run it through the clasp half, and then down and back through the crimp. And now the way I was taught, and to be clear, I do not really recommend this method, is you then just take chain nose pliers and give it a good squish. And don't get me wrong, that's not going anywhere, but it doesn't exactly look pretty and it has some sharp edges. So I was pretty sure that there had to be a better way to do it. So I'm going to show you what I incrementally learned. So first of all, if you don't have a pair, I highly recommend crimping pliers. Now these are going to have like a little C shape right here, C-shaped notch closest to the handles, and then an elliptical shaped notch further out. Some might have multiple notches if they're made for multiple sizes of crimps. These work best with a 2mm crimp, which is just about what we got here. So now I'm going to do the same thing to start out. Just going to string my little clasp half on, string it back through the wire, but instead of using any old pliers, we'll let these crimp pliers do the job. And again, I'm going to get it kind of as tight as I can. You don't want it like so tight that you can't move the clasp half, but just kind of tight. And we're going to go into this first notch here. Here, let's try to show you so you can see. It is in that first little C-shaped notch. We're going to squish it, and it forms it into a little curved C shape there. Now we're going to kind of turn that C shape on its side, and we are going to form it in the first notch. And sometimes I like to spin it, give it a couple squeezes until it feels really tight. So now, instead of this big wide rectangle, you have a much more nicely formed. You can see I did mine a little bit diagonal there, probably not my best crimp ever, but it is a much tighter look than the squishy chain nose marked crimp there. Now, there are lots of findings that will help you finish your crimp a little more professionally. So I'm going to show you some of those and some of my favorites. So first of all, move those. Let's take a look at wire guardians. So a wire guardian is going to be this little kind of a U shape, almost looks like a little horseshoe. It's got a little like collar hole on both sides and just a wire that goes between. And so the point of a wire guardian is to, unsurprisingly, protect your wire from rubbing against your clasp half in case it has like sharp edges. And it also, in my opinion, just makes it look a little more finished. So let's take a look at that. So we're going to start out with our crimp bead, and then we're going to go up one side of the wire guardian, down back through the other side, and then back through the crimp bead. And sometimes I like to also take some needle nose pliers and gently pinch the edges of the wire guardian together, like so, just so that it's a little bit less of a large opening. And you can, before you put the crimp bead on, if you want, here I'll show you. If your clasp has a big enough hole, you can just slide it on and have it sit in the middle of the wire guardian, which would have been a good thing to do before I pinched it shut with the pliers, but you know, hindsight's 20/20 and all. There we are. So now you've got a nice little professional looking reinforced metal loop on the end that's just gonna, it has that extra peace of mind. Like that's not gonna go anywhere. Also, if you are using like a jump ring as a clasp half, and this is not a jump ring, I've messed with it all, it's just these come slightly open. A wire guardian will make your wire thicker so that it's less likely to slip through that opening in the jump ring. You can see how wide that opening is. I could easily fit the plain wire through it, but because it has the guardian on it, it is holding. And now I'm just going to do a two-step crimp. So again, I'm going to fold it into a C shape, or to squish it into a C shape, and then fold that C shape into a round. And if you don't like the way that your crimp comes out, well, that one's not bad, it's fairly round, you can use a crimp cover to cover it up. And they make specialized pliers that will close crimp covers. And I actually own a pair, but I didn't like super duper duper love them. They're useful if it's exactly the right size of crimp cover. And on the topic of sizes, one thing that I do get asked a lot is what size crimp bead should I use with my cord? And for that matter, what size cord should I use? And to address the cording first, with Tigertail, generally you want something, if you're going to use a thicker Tigertail, you're going to want to have heavier beads. Tigertail will kink. Let me get a scrap piece and show you. If the beads are too light and you fold it or it gets folded too tightly, it'll kink and it just doesn't look very attractive. Heavier beads will hold the Tigertail in place, and by heavier, I don't mean they have to be 14 millimeters in size. I'm saying if you're using 3 millimeter or 4 millimeter tiny little beads or smaller, you're gonna want a thinner Tigertail, and the more strands it has, the more flexible it will be. So get yourself like a nice like multi-strand, like a 21 strand or 49 strand, really thin Tigertail if you're using delicate beads. Now the sizes that we sell most often are going to be your more middle of the road, fairly sturdy sizes, which is going to be like 0.38 and 0.45 millimeter. And the reason I like those, like this one, I believe is a 0.45, is that they are sturdy enough to work with like an 8 millimeter size bead. And that's what I use most often. That's what I see people use most often. Those are the sizes. I've tried selling or carrying some of the smaller or larger sizes, and they just don't sell as quickly because this is just going to be more of your most common middle of the road. It'll work for a lot of different projects. Again, if you've got tiny beads, you'll want something thinner than the 0.38. But the 0.38 is really good for the 6 to 8 millimeter, and the 0.45 is really good for like the 8 and 10 millimeter. And even some of the larger, heavier beads too. The Tigertail is very strong, and especially the wire guardian will help protect it and keep it from fraying against your clasp, which is a major point of failure commonly in designs. So as far as what size crimp bead, I would say, first of all, if you're using a soft flex or a Beadalon, all those manufacturers have charts of the size of crimp bead they recommend with each different wire size they carry. For us, I find with the 0.38 and the 0.45 millimeter that you'll see most commonly on our website, 2 millimeter crimp works really, really well. You want to have plenty of room to run it through twice. If you're making a multi-strand design, you may want a 3 millimeter. If you want to put them through the same crimp bead, which I usually don't do that. I usually crimp my strands separately. Just because I find the crimp beads are less likely to break if you're not putting the strain of a lot of different strands, pulling a lot of different ways on them. So all that to say, with a 0.38 or 0.45, I find the 2 millimeter works really well. You've got enough extra to form with the crimping pliers, but you don't have a ton left over sticking out every which way. So that's my 2 cents. Again, you can, different suppliers and manufacturers have different size charts and recommended crimp charts, etc. that you can check out, and those are good resources. So if you aren't sure, you can always look on their websites or Google it. But for me, with the sizes I use most commonly, like again, the 0.38 and the 0.45, I really like a 2mm crimp. And as far as crimp covers go, which is where I was headed with this, you're going to want about a 1mm extra size. So if you're doing a 2mm crimp, you'll want it to probably be at least 2.5, maybe 3mm in height here. And you're going to want at least a 3mm diameter when it's closed, just to make sure that it'll fit. But again, if you've done a 2-step crimp, that's going to be the size you need for that. If you've done a single step crimp, it'll shoot out, like you'll have squishy bits of the crimp bead going other directions, and you might need a larger cover. So the crimp covers, they can be a little tricky. What I like to do is I like to pick them up with a needle nose plier. They're kind of a C shape, like an open C. So I like to pick them up. If I can, I may have to use my chain nose because, all right. And then you slide them over your crimp here, which I'm going to use. There we are. That one actually had a pretty narrow hole. All right, so now you've got, it looks like a little Pac-Man. You've got a little opening in there. I don't know if you can see your little crimp is sitting inside. And now I like to try to tuck one end kind of under and then tuck the other end slightly over that first end. And you're trying to make it round. As I've said, there are specialized pliers designed to do this, but I've found that they're really finicky and I don't love them. So if it could be that I'm just not very good with them and I have a little more practice doing it. And then sometimes I squeeze top to bottom to get it to line up. There we are. And one more squeeze at this angle should kind of do it. Tuck that side under, tuck that side over. All right, so now you've got like a rounded bead over your crimp. So you don't have to look at the crimp bead. And it's a nicer finish. So again, I am not the world's greatest at doing crimp covers. I don't use them as often. The type of finish that I use most often, as in my videos as well, is probably the clamshell bead tip. And I'm going to show you what those look like here and why I love them. All right, so with the clamshell bead tip, again, you have a lot of different sizes, and the size that you want is going to be, you want the inside diameter, again, to be about 1 millimeter larger than the crimp size that you're using. But I really love these. Here's a little bitty one. I'm probably going to use one just a teeny tiny bit bigger. Maybe one of these. Because they are sturdy and they're very professional and they're kind of an all-in-one crimp cover. So, and a wire protector. Basically, you have one piece that does what these two pieces do. So how these work is you slide them on before your crimp bead. And instead of attaching the clasp half directly, you're just going to close the crimp bead and then you'll use the loops. Sometimes these have a hook. I don't like the hooks very much. I find they break off. Some only have one loop. I really prefer two because that kind of holds it closed by default. But there are lots of styles out there. So what I like to do is run the wire around and back through the crimp bead. This just gives it more to hold on to. And this is the one case where sometimes I don't double crimp because you're not going to see it and it's a little tricky to double crimp with that wire coming around and back through, but we'll give it a shot anyway. And I'm gonna, yeah. All right, so that didn't turn out too bad. Now we're going to trim the wire. And then running the wire back through just kind of really gives it more traction I've had a lot less breakage when I do that, of the crimp bead, that is. And then you will just fold the cover up over top. And I like to use needle nose here, just kind of gently close it. You don't want to squeeze too hard, you don't want to leave a mark, you just want to join those halves. And if you want to, you can put a glue dot in there. If I had a cord I was knotting that I was doing, I would probably use glue. With the crimps, I don't usually bother. And then I would generally put a small spacer bead right on the end there. Like I like a little 3mm round to kind of ease your way into it visually as well. And then you would just use a jump ring to attach your clasp half. So that's another way to finish it. And you can decide which you prefer visually. The nice thing about clamshells, one of the big advantages, is you don't have to worry about trimming and tucking under this end. It's all hidden. You don't have any little sharp pointy pieces, and that is really the thing I love most about them. I have very sensitive skin. I'm kind of a highly sensitive person, and I really like the way this just encloses the end. But you can see both of these look more professional and more finished than just having your visible wire with your crimp. So there's kind of 3 different ways to do it. Now, another way, and these we just got in, we've had them in before, and they sold out, and we got more in. We're going to try to carry them more regularly. This is your stopper crimp. So these are a little different. They're a whole different kind of crimp bead. You do not need the crimping pliers for them. I would recommend needle nose probably. And they are very easy to use. I'll just cut a small piece here to demonstrate with. All you do with these is, and you can use a wire guardian if you like. I'll go ahead and show you with the wire guardian because that's probably what I would do in real life if I was actually making a jewelry piece and not just a demonstration. Well, I'll get the wire and then I'll worry about the clasp half. Alright, so I've got my, well, I had it and I let it go. That's my bad. Got my wire guardian on. Gonna stick my clasp half in there. And now I'm going to push the ends. First of all, pull the string tight, or the wire tight. Now I'm going to push the ends together, just a little bit of that wire guardian. There we go. Just bring it in a little. And now I'm going to put both strands through this crimp stopper. And it's got this little like button sticking up. So you just press it down. Okay, and I usually do it from 2 different angles. I'll push it down from one side, and then I'll switch and I'll push it down from the other. There we go. Did you hear that? Making some progress there. And I promise you, I make this look a lot harder than it is. I have bad wrists, but I can still do this. So it does not take a whole ton of pressure to secure. It just needs to be pushed pretty far down. You can see we're making some progress, but it's got a little ways to go. Here. And that's where I turn it to the other side and push it from the other angle. All right. There we go. That's pretty secure there. It doesn't feel like that's going anywhere. So this just gives you a really nice bead look. And then again, you would trim and tuck under the end here. And definitely do see if you can use a chain nose plier and not, or I'm sorry, a flat nose plier and not a chain nose plier. I don't recommend it as far as like marring the finish. It just helped me make sure I had it down all the way. And I did. All right, so here are 4 different methods to, I'll go ahead and trim them all, to finish your beading wire. Technically 5. If we look at the first two that we did. And I hope this is helpful. There are a lot of ways you can finish up your projects. These are some of the ways I've found that just really make a piece look polished and professional. You can hide those edges. First of all, here's the first one that we did with just that chain nose crimp here. So that was our first one. Here is a two-step crimp versus the chain nose. Here is our wire guardian and crimp cover. And the wire guardian and stopper crimp. And then your clamshell bead tip. So I would love to know what your favorite way to finish your pieces is. If you have a favorite, let me know in the comments. If there are other basic techniques you'd like to see demonstrated, let me know too. I hope this is helpful. There are a lot of ways out there to finish your jewelry. And these are some of my favorites. All right, thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. And as always, happy beading.